Next, I would like to invite Mr. Dave Drach, who is the Vice President of Innovation Sales. So the topic is entrepreneurs corporate innovation. And again, we will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so please feel free to enter your questions into the chat box. Now, the floor is yours.
Hello, this is Dave Drach. I am the Vice President of Innovation Sales at Techstars, and I'm pleased to be presenting here in front of you today. Unfortunately, I can't be there live, but excited to share this information and actually answer questions live as we can. So let me start the presentation here. Now, to start with, I've been working with corporations for 2 decades in their engagement with startups. So if I have worked with major corporations, small corporations, and my background is the last 10 years I've been here at Techstars, and I've been building corporate programs, built essentially the corporate accelerator model at Techstars, and really the first corporate accelerator model that existed. And prior to that, I was with what became Microsoft Ventures. So we built essentially the startup engagement for Microsoft. And prior to that, I helped build what is now Microsoft Dynamics, and we sold that to Microsoft as essentially their accounting solution that they now sell worldwide. What I'll walk through today is I'm going to talk about some of the best practices I've learned over the years and how to be effective in working with startups and how you can benefit startups and entrepreneurs in that process. So first of all, I want to cover the entrepreneur's journey. So in the entrepreneur's journey, you start out, an entrepreneur gets inspired to go, leave their day job, go build a new company. They kind of learn the basic tools, how to do that. That's kind of the second step. Third step is they decide to commit to it and build their own company. So they start their own company. They actually get funding from friends and family and the resources that they have, maybe their own deep pockets to execute. They build their startup, which is the next stage. They scale up that startup, start to get traction, revenue across the industry, and grow their product lines. And then at some point in time, perhaps they may exit and actually sell their company. And at that time, they leave that startup and come back, and they're able to support other founders who are going through a similar journey. Now, there's an overlay on how corporates engage with this life cycle. So when you look at the early side, it's a very innovative process. The startups are very innovative. They're actually doing things that you really do and solving problems that you want to learn about. They may not have the solution yet, but you want to actually see and work with them, see what kind of problems they're working on. Second stage is where you can actually start to engage with them. So this is where you can actually start to work with the startups, buy products from the startups, collaborate, partner, et cetera. And prior to perhaps an acquisition scenario, but some form of different types of partnerships. And I'll talk about a few examples of those today. And then the final is acquire. So that final stage is when you get to the end and you say, hey, it's really interesting what we're doing together. It makes sense for us to acquire each other. And this is what I did at Microsoft and have done through the years here at Techstars, helping our companies, some of our companies get acquired. Now, one of the most important thing here is that a lot of corporations, they want to go through this gigantic plan before they start to really engage entrepreneurs. And the fact is you can engage them at many different stages of the life cycle. And so what I want to highlight here is that you may start in just working with the community, sponsoring an event, very lightweight, get some things going, something like a startup weekend. The second thing you can do as an individual, as an executive team, or even as a team member, you can encourage your team members to do this, is they can go and mentor in a program and actually start to have that experience in working with founders and understanding, how they can help founders. The third real kind of life cycle piece here is that you can actually buy something from a startup. And this is one of the first ones where you really start to build some infrastructure around that, understand how to do it. But that's buying partnerships, things like that really help you understand how to work with startups and also how to learn from them. The next big step is actually build your own accelerator or build your own startup programs and do that with partners like Techstars, or you can do that on your own or with regional partners as you see fit. The next thing you can do really is ventures. So some companies actually start and they just dive into doing ventures. I would suggest doing some of the other activities here before diving in and actually building a venture firm. But you can build your own corporate venture entity. You can focus on strategic activities. You can focus on kind of broader, what I call treasury, where you're actually going to make some returns as an objective in that fund. And then and then down the road too, you can actually focus on acquisitions. Now, acquisitions you can do at any stage. For example, in this life cycle, you just start by acquiring a startup that made sense and integrating them into your company. But as you kind of move through each of these stages, you start to integrate everything in with your operating infrastructure, with your strategy, with R&D, with your intellectual property, strategies and themes, and into your operations. Because as you work with startups, you need to figure out how do I actually do something quickly and easily and interesting with a startup. So fortunately, these days, we have more kind of academic research. We see more books coming out. We see more kind of analysis on how to do this successfully. And companies have been doing it for a long time now, but I think it's great that we're getting some explicit research kind of coming in. So I had a friend, Shamin Parshanam, who wrote a book called Gorillas Can Dance. This is after 1 decade of research on how corporations work with different founders and startups. And what he kind of boiled down in the book is you have 2 approaches. One approach is the funnel, where you're looking at, based on your engagement thesis, you define a collection of startups that you're interested in working with. And you filter those through some criteria. You work with an external tech scouting firm, or you work with your internal teams to go through and filter through and find startups that you're interested in working with. And then you pick a few to do some interesting things with. Another approach you can take there is either sponsor or actually create your own incubator. An incubator is a continuous process. It's different than an accelerator, but an incubator is always available, always live, and you kind of move companies through the same kind of filter process into and out of an incubator that you may be hosting or working with. The cohort approach is essentially putting everything into a closed time frame. So in a cohort approach, you have a specific start date and specific end date, and you have a set of goals you have to achieve in that time frame. So the benefit of the cohort approach is it forces activities to occur both on the corporate side as well as on the startup side. So if you're really trying to force acceleration of innovation and acceleration of engagement with startups, then the cohort approach is something you should evaluate. And that, in the way that Techstars delivers that, we have 2 things. We have the Techstars Accelerator, which is world famous and you probably are familiar with. And we also have the Techstars Founder Catalyst, which is a pre-accelerator program, kind of part of that learning stage, as I went over in the founder's journey earlier, the earlier slide. Now, just for Techstars all up, I just wanted to highlight a few of the key numbers regarding Techstars and the Techstars Accelerator. So these numbers cover the Techstars Accelerator that we've been running for 14 years now. And just to highlight a few key numbers here, we have 6 companies that have gone through IPO, that are now public companies. We have more than 18 unicorns. Unicorns are companies that are $1 million in value, $1 billion in valuation or more, $1 billion or more in valuation. And every company that goes through a Techstars program raises $1 million. So, well, an average of $1 million. So some companies may raise 6 million coming out of the accelerator, and some may raise just a few $100,000. But the average is across the thousands of companies that have gone through the program is $1 million. And the total market cap of all the companies that we have in the portfolio right now is 70 billion. So that just demonstrates the impact that the Techstars Accelerator has, also the accelerator process in general has, with helping companies kind of get that first money, get that real money, get those connections to the investors. We have over 20,000 investors investing in our companies, and that network is what actually drives all these numbers. Now, I just wanted to touch on a few key case studies that we've had over the years, and I think you can actually click through these and actually see the background data on these. Let me start with Techstars Mobility, which was in Detroit. So Techstars Mobility was in partnership with Ford and a collection in the automotive industry. And there was a company called Spatial that Ford started working with. Spatial actually takes social data coming from Twitter and different social feeds, and they actually map that onto geography by time. So you can actually see what's going on in certain regions. For example, in a city, is there a collection of hot nightlife activities going on, or is there maybe a challenge where there could be traffic situations and things like that? So Ford was looking at this and actually evaluating and integrating it and doing some trials and integrating it into navigation scenarios. The second example I'd like to talk through is Wave BL, Wave Business Language, and they came out of the Barclays Accelerator in New York City. And Wave basically takes they take business documents and put them onto the blockchain. And in partnership with Barclays, they're the first full blockchain digital implementation of all the trade documents required, essentially to ship a shipload of butter from Ireland to the African nation of Seychelles. So that was really the first, pool of full trading set of documents done in a digital form with blockchain. And then the last example here was the Disney Accelerator. We created, and actually, by the way, each of these little pictures here is a representation of the accelerator spaces that we operated, that we built in partnership with the corporations where we ran these programs. But in the Disney Accelerator, we had a company, Sphero, that built a small rolling robot. It was one of the robot toys. And it just so happened that Disney was coming out with a movie that had BB-8, which was essentially a rolling robot. So in collaboration with Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, and a collection of others, they went on and created the Sphero BB-8 robot, which they created as a toy. And they also partnered with Disney to create the automation system to help the robot itself that's in the movie. So both Disney and Sphero got a lot of benefits out of that collaboration over the years, and they've done very well. Those are just some case studies. We have many, many more, but these are just ones that I personally have been involved with and just wanted to highlight. Now, if you're building a corporate program, there's some foundation work that you have to do. And part of that foundation work is you have to create an engagement thesis. Like, you have to understand, why are you doing an accelerator, and why do you want to engage with startups? What are the measures of that? What do you want to achieve? Are there specific challenges or business problems or gaps that you have in your current intellectual property that you want to solve in engaging with startups? So kind of lay out that framework. Second piece is super important. Quality is crucial. So when you look at the startup ecosystem, there's hundreds of thousands of startups. I mean, I think I read an article once that there was tens of thousands, every day being created in for example, in one city, Beijing, I think it was tens of thousands of startups being created every day. But you want to engage in startups that really have the potential to deliver the innovations that you're interested in, deliver a partnership that you're interested in, and help you kind of either grow from a regional ecosystem or from a targeted intellectual property domain. Super important. Quality is crucial. And when you as an executive, you as a senior executive, are engaging with this founder, what you'll see when you're dealing with the top tier and the top high quality startups, you will see those entrepreneurs be your peer in intellectual conversations in every possible way. Third is engage consistently. So when you're every time you're working with a startup, you're creating a reputation for yourself in the startup community. And you have to realize that all these founders, all these entrepreneurs talk to each other. And so you want to have a high quality, top tier reputation in that ecosystem. And that's one of the things, like, for example, when I work with the corporate partners and my friends on the corporate side, that's one thing we really try to instill with them. You want to be good participants in that startup ecosystem. Build your innovation brand. You want to build that externally. So you want to leverage PR, leverage your visibility of your programs, and make it, essentially, when you do something interesting with a startup, make a big splash about it. And also, you want to make sure that you do that in support of the startup. So make sure that they're part of those stories as well, because those founders will trust you more for that, and they'll actually respect you more for that. And last, I got to say, without a doubt, is get moving. Pick a program, as I described earlier. You can do something as light as just mentoring, but pick a high quality program. Make sure that you can be a mentor in that program and get engaged. So I'm Dave Drach. I'm a Vice President of Innovation Sales here at Techstars. I encourage you to work with your local ecosystem, work with your local Techstars representatives and other programs, and get engaged in the startup ecosystem. If you do it in a structured, disciplined way, it will have tremendous benefits for you personally and for your corporation. Thank you.
Hello, good to see everyone.
Hello, Dave. Thank you for coming. So, 最初の質問ですけど、ビジネスユニットの長として、コーポレートの KPI にいつも追われているようです。どのように彼らにイノベーションを受け入れていただくのがいいのか、どうやってコミットさせるのがいいでしょうかという質問です。
Yes, I think you have to create explicit measurable goals when you're creating your innovation strategy. So when you're defining your KPIs in alignment with your business unit, and probably you have to figure out what are the best measures that you want to execute against. I would strongly suggest learning, essentially continuous learning as being a very important one. When you start to create your engagements, define how you're going to learn from the founders. If you follow some of those guiding principles that I gave you, you'll be working with the top founders, high quality founders through carefully structured programs, and you want to continuously learn. That'll actually help you lead to better innovations internally through open innovation practices, but it also allow you to engage effectively with some of the key startups. And in fact, all those examples that I gave there, those case studies, were examples of those corporations learning from that process. Some solved real business problems, but all of it was clearly learning on how to do things with new technologies, new business practices.
ありがとうございます。私たちにもう一つ。
Thank you so much. I have one more question that I have received. Incorporate, when they want to work together with startups, if they want to source to Techstars or to venture capital, so maybe that is going to be a shortcut for success. So what is the really meaning to do accelerator program on their own? Because sorting to Techstars or companies looks like more effective and more quicker.
Yeah, good question. So just to summarize, is it better to run an accelerator on your own, or is it better to partner with a experienced and well-known operator such as Techstars? And especially when you're getting started, I think it's extremely important to partner with somebody who has experience and strong reputation in the industry, because as I discussed earlier, the quality of the startups, the curation of those companies so that you're engaging with very high quality, very talented entrepreneurs, because it all comes down to the relationship between you and your executive teams and those founders. And so you want those founders to be peers to you intellectually and to some degree from a business and experience perspective. And so you want somebody who has good experience. I think once you get experience, perhaps working with an experienced operator, you can venture out and do your own. I know many of our partners, such as Disney and Target and Metro, I think, in throughout Asia, other partners have done exactly that. Microsoft did exactly that. Is something you can do, but I think you have to have a good foundation, a very solid footing to get the program started.
ありがとうございます。もう一
Thank
つ
you very much. I have one more very interesting question. For open innovation for big companies, if it's not the core business of your company, it's a little distant from your business, but people tend to focus on those fields for acceleration. And then you would say that it will limit the scope of what the corporation will be able to provide. And so when acceleration is conducted in a field which is slightly different from the core business, what would you say in this perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, if your engagement around innovation is something that is basically, a little different than the core strategy or core function of the company, how do you focus on that effectively? And so I think there always has to be some kind of strategic alignment. So for example, my team at Microsoft was focused on this very challenge. A good example was I worked with Mahjong, which is Minecraft. And eventually I was supporting the Xbox team at the time for acquisitions, and we eventually acquired Mahjong. And at first, the Xbox team looked at Mahjong and the way that they licensed product, and they couldn't understand the licensing model because at the time, Mahjong, the company which was based out of Sweden, would license servers. They didn't have individual game fees that did anything like a normal game. But the alignment was the massive traction that they were getting in a particular demographic. So you looked at the age demographic, about 8 years old to 12 years old from a game player perspective, and the traction was tremendous. So they understood that the game content was high quality. They had to figure out how to make the monetization model, the business model fit. So there was a mutation that had to that had to happen and to make that evolution occur. They ran some trials, they did some tests, and eventually it was proven to be a viable acquisition. And then the acquisition executed. So you always want to have an alignment on some elements of those innovation concepts or themes or products, and then run your experiments, learn from those experiments. They may lead to an investment or an acquisition, or they may simply lead to learning, which you integrate into your core practices and your core strategies and continue to evaluate. So pretty much those, either, there's some piece that innovation that's worth engaging, and then you have to see how the rest of the pieces may or may not be beneficial. And there's other situations where the beneficial part was the business model. And so it depends. Sometimes it's the technology, sometimes it's the business model. Those pieces are what you have to dig into and evaluate.
Thank you very much by giving us some very specific example. It was very easy to understand. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, the time that we have is only 5 minutes, but I'm sorry that we have to stop here. Thank you very much for participating today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave.